What's happening, everyone? Wolfpack back at the headquarters, back at the den. I am your neighbor. I'm here to lead you again. Another week, another episode of Market Watch Mondays. This is your dose. I'm recording earlier this week, recording on Friday because I'm actually heading out and we'll be out of the HQ this weekend. But we didn't want to drop the ball in the episode, man. Just so you guys know, we're always grinding at the HQ to get you the content you need to add W to that column. So, also, the benefit is what I want to talk about today specifically is a little bit of strategy. So again, like most of my episodes, don't really rely on the NFL games that happen Sunday. They're great to watch, but the tools and I guess the concepts that I'm trying to teach you via these Market Watch Monday episodes are things that I hope you can employ long term, regardless of week to week variability, regardless of the games. But anyways, that's a long-winded way to say, without further ado, you know what time it is. Let's hit that intro.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Today, it's not going to be a long episode because I just want to really cover this concept. I think it's an important concept to cover. And, in the past episodes, I've gone on pretty long getting into players and all that stuff. But I think for this episode, I just want to really teach you guys a concept of like risk transfer, like risk management. That's how I think about it, right? Similar to how when you invest in a portfolio, you don't just put all your money into like a penny stock. You have to like look at the portfolio as a whole and diversify your risk. I think, from a fantasy perspective, I'm actually not a big believer of diversifying risk per se in terms of like actually like, not drafting players. I'm scared of too much exposure. First of all, when you play in like as enough leagues as I do, like you're just like you're gonna get natural diversification based on where you draft in the class and based on trades because you're not gonna be able to trade for the guy you want in every single league. So it's always tough, and that's how I think about like natural diversification. It's just like from where you draft. If you draft in the 101, right, you can only get like CMC. Well, before he got injured, like you can only get CMC if you draft from 101, right? If you only get Patrick Mahomes if you draft from 101 in the super flex. So if you're drafting in the middle later rounds, it's like not that big of a deal. I think and then when you can acquire a lot of a single player, usually it's because the cost for that player is pretty cheap. So the risk is already kind of mitigated that way. So I don't really worry about diversifying that way. When I'm all in on a player, like I really am all in. I can get up to like 50, 60% exposure sometimes. Normally I'm in like the 30 to 40% just because like natural diversification. And, sometimes I want to buy high on a player and it's hard to buy high when everyone's really high on that player. So you can't always get there. But like that's not what the risk I want to talk about today is, right? Like that's natural diversification. I hear a lot of people, often talk about diversifying your players. Don't always draft the same guy once. Don't always, go after the same guy. Don't have such high concentration because a lot of risk. And that, I think it takes care of itself with natural diversification. What I want to talk about today though is like risk transferring and specifically for rebuilding teams. I talk a lot about rebuilding because I feel like that's a really fun aspect of dynasty. If you're a contender in dynasty, it's basically like redraft almost, right? Like because you're just playing for the W and you're trying to get all in. But I think rebuild is like where you really can take on a lot of strategy, look forward to next year, or even 2 years out sometimes, and really put together like formulate a plan, so to speak, about what you want your roster to look like, what type of assets you're carrying today, and then what type of assets you want to get to tomorrow to eventually get you the win in the W column because that's all that matters in the day. But I really personally enjoy the rebuild process, which is why I always have like, a few teams where I go in and intentionally like rebuild and just like start from the jump and just punt year one and just like really accumulate the assets and try and like establish that dominance 2 or 3 years down the line. But risk transferring is probably like one of the most important things you have to do when you are a rebuilding team, right? And what I mean by that is like if there are assets on your team that are at a high risk of, you know, some event happening to dramatically decrease their value, you usually want to part ways with that asset and get something safer back in return. And usually what that safer back in return is like a rookie draft pick, because as I've always said in this channel, rookie first round picks are the treasury bills of fantasy football. They never go down, they always go up, and they are the single best value storage and currency. And number two, I talked about last week, is early producing rookie wide receivers. The Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, these guys are going to really hold value, because even if they tank, even if they like don't do as great next year, people always look back and remember on the rookie year that they had. So their value is always protected. So those are two of the single, I would say, safest assets you can acquire in Dynasty. And I'm not a huge like zero wide receiver proponent, right? But when it comes to rebuilding, when it comes to punting your points off your team and thinking about next year and trying to go for that higher draft pick, wide receivers is like the core of what you kind of build around. Wide receivers and quarterbacks, as I talked about in one of my previous episodes. Wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends. Those are the assets I always accumulate first, and running backs are last. So, we always talk about rookie picks. So that's number one. You always want to try and acquire that. So that's how you, I guess, so to speak, transfer the risk away, right? Because what happens is you take something, a player, right, that could be performing well right now. Someone, like a who's like Aaron Jones, right? Someone like a James Robinson, a channel favorite. Someone like a just some of these guys that are just like playing right now, that are playing well, but carry a lot of risk. Like if you take some of those guys, one, you get their points off your team, which is good for your draft picks. But two, you take away all that risk and you take the value of what you traded them for now. Hopefully, it's a good return, because you can get a good return for someone like a James Robinson, someone like an Aaron Jones, right? You used to be able to get a good return for someone like Zeke, but you can't anymore. But someone like a Nick Chubb, for example, these are all guys that are good assets, right? And I want to stress that it's like it's good assets. You're not going to transfer risk of a shitty asset to someone else, because nobody's want to carry that risk, because the reward is not worth the risk. But if you have a good asset, someone like one of these guys, now is the time to really push to transfer it to a contender for safer assets, right? Because James Robinson, as much as I love him, and I love him as a player, he's one of my top guys. I've been like on this train like basically since like week one of the season, he still carries a lot of risk. I believe that he will be the starting running back next year, right? I think that is the most likely scenario, because the Jaguars don't have any reason to draft a running back. They have to fill so many other holes first. But there's always a chance, right? There's always a chance that, like, chances are this coaching regime is probably gone next year, right? And this coaching regime is the one that really, really favored James Robinson, that gave him the opportunity, that made him a workhorse. What happens if another regime comes in? What happens if like Adam Gase gets fired from the Jets and he joins the Jacksonville Jaguars? We know what he does to fantasy value of players, right, at the skilled position and quarterbacks, just everything, all fantasy players. Uh, like then you're screwed, right? Because then you're stuck in a terrible situation. And what you could have done is capitalize on the value of someone like James Robinson by grabbing that mid-round rookie first, or like that higher round rookie first, that first and a second round pick, which is I honestly think we can command for him, or just taking him and flipping him for like a Justin Jefferson, right? Take even if you have to add a little bit, taking him. I saw someone flip them for like a CeeDee Lamb plus. That's a smash deal every time. Taking him and flipping him for like a T Higgins plus. If you're a rebuilder, you only care about value. That's what I talk about. That's why rebuilding is so fun. You don't have to worry about scoring points. You don't have to worry about fielding a lineup. The only thing, you remove all these like challenging variables you have to deal with in fantasy, and it simplifies it to value only. And all I do is look at, when I'm rebuilding, I'm looking at projected value of players. I'm always just looking to get players who I think will increase in value or store value. And someone like James Robinson would be really good for contender, right? It's a win-win situation, because they can use him to win now, and you can use him to store value on your team to be held till next year. So if you look at your team as a basket of assets, and you have guys like James Robinson, and you have first round picks, and you have second round picks, and you have guys like, Keenan Allen, who we know is going to be declining in value. You have guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, right? These are the types of assets you should be looking to dump in order to get a more protected younger assets. Even though you're losing on the points, but again, that is not a factor in your equation decision making process, because like you don't really care about scoring points. All you care about is value, and that is what I like to call the transfer of risk, right? Taking value, two things that are equivalent in value today, but one is slightly riskier, and taking that risk and transferring it over to a counterparty and having them assume that risk for you. And that is what you can do with some of these studs, that like, especially at the running back position, right? Like those are always the most risky, because one, they get injured, but two, if someone comes, like it totally tanks their value, right? Look at like Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard joined, right? That's brutal for Miles Sanders. We know Miles Sanders is a stud, but when they sign back a guy who literally all he does is vulture TDs, that's going to impact his value, right? So even these guys, these stud running backs that you feel like are protected and they're going to do great, like the now is the time to sell, because you have something to offer, and that's points to a contender, and people are always willing to pay more and as they should be willing to pay more to win a championship in season. Even someone like, someone like a Alvin Kamara, right? Who right now is like basically a locked in dynasty top 3 running back. But he is 25 years old, right? He's had a couple injuries in the past in terms of his high ankle sprain. But more importantly, we have no idea what is going to happen when Drew Brees leaves. We're about to get a sample. By the time you're watching this, the game would have already happened. So if I'm eating crow and somehow Tice Taysom Hill went off for like 300 yards and 7 targets to Alvin Kamara, then sure, like whatever, I'll take that L. But like the chances are he's not. No one is going to be as good for Alvin Kamara as Drew Brees, because Drew Brees is the screen god. He's a dump off king. I mean, he throws like a white noodle now, so he can't even push it downfield. So like Alvin Kamara is that guy for him. But like that's a risk, right? That you can probably just totally mitigate by trading Alvin Kamara for something like Saquon Barkley plus. Like you can easily right now get Saquon Barkley plus a second for Alvin Kamara. Saquon Barkley's value is already low, in my opinion, and that is already protected. That is like his floor value. Once he becomes healthy, once you start seeing training camp news come out, once you see, once they show a video of Barkley cutting, like these are all points where his value will continue to increase, because everyone remembers what Saquon did in his rookie year. Everyone remembers what he did towards the back half of his sophomore season. We all know he's a stud, right? He is a generational type player, and that type of value is protected because he's also still only 23. So that's a trade where you can make to protect that value. A trade you can make for Devontae Adams, right? Devontae Adams right now is the wide receiver one, and for a contender, he is absolutely, the creme de la creme. I tweeted this out, but like he is the only wide receiver that is really a league winner, in my opinion, based on the point advantages he gives you. But if you're a rebuilding team, you should be looking to get out from him, because what happens once he hits 28 years old, right? His value is going to tank. No matter what you say, I say about how good he is, his value is going to decrease once he hits 28 years old. And 29 years old, it's going to absolutely crater, because that's just how dynasty is played. Like wide receiver production, kind of like, it goes up, 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 up. And then like hits 30, it's like it maybe flattens out a little bit. It probably still keeps going up. But then the dynasty value, once it hits 30, it's just like, it just fucking craters to the ground. So that's another type of asset where like what happens if Aaron Rodgers leaves, right? What do we do then, right? These are all risks that are baked in. And so, like I said, I mentioned Aaron Jones before, who's an absolute stud right now, but he still doesn't have a contract, right? So we don't know what's going to happen there. What happens if he goes to another team, another committee? They don't use him the same way. So like these are all these types of assets, usually stud running backs and wide receivers at that like age 27, 28 are assets that you should all be looking to move, and transferring that risk onto someone else and getting protected assets back in return in the form of young stud wide receivers and rookie first round picks. And if you can't get 2021 first, look forward to 2022. I have a lot of people message me like, hey, Mike, should I take a 2022 first? Like, or is that class like super weak? First of all, nobody knows how strong that class is going to be, right? We have some sense. I have some players I really like. I don't think it's going to be 2020, but the fact remains, like there's going to be players that emerge always players who emerge that we don't know of at the time, and it's going to boost the value of that class up once the time gets closer. It's just like, it's literally like, it's a fact of life. It just happens. It's inevitable. It's like Thanos. It happens every single time, every single year. Once we get to the draft, values increase. So no matter what, even if it's 2022 first, that value is lower to you now because it's 2 years out, but that in 2 years that value is going to increase. And I talked about this before. Like, so I would say like I wouldn't value it the same as a 2021 first, but usually what I would try and do is like if someone can't give you a 2021 first, then you're like, okay, well, give me your 2022 first and your 2022 second to kind of make up for that year. And that kind of move like usually swings quite a decent bit, even if you toss a little piece back. So I'll give you some examples of trades I would love to do as a rebuilder. If I could take Devontae Adams and flip him for a T Higgins plus a 2021 first, most people view that as selling cheap. But to me, it's selling cheap now, but 1 year from now, like maybe the value's like this, like you have T Higgins in the first year and Devontae Adams is up here and you sell for a little bit of loss. But I think in 1 year, 2 years from now, it's going to look like this, depending on who you draft with that first round pick. Right. So I'm always looking toward the future. And that's why I'm always okay taking a little bit of a loss on a trade to transfer that risk and also to store that value and lock in the gains, right? We always want to try and lock in the gains as a rebuilder. And the best way to do it is to sell studs. Like too often I see people on Twitter being like, if you're a rebuilder, sell Julio Jones. If you're a rebuilder, sell Big Ben. If you're a rebuilder, like sell sell like all these old aging players. Like, yeah, no shit. That's like common sense. Obviously, you have to sell those shitty players, but the fact is the market for them is not going to be as high, right? The key is to like get out a little bit early. It's better like to be a little bit early than to be like 2 years late. Because if you sold Julio early, you're probably getting like multiple first round picks. If you waited one more year, you're probably only getting a single first. So that's a big difference. That's why I'm saying like if you're a rebuild, if you're a contender, you're riding Adams to the promised land, right? You're riding Derrick Henry to the promised land. You're riding Aaron Jones to the promised land. But if you're a rebuilder, this is like a great time to try and sell off on some of these peak assets and trade down Devontae Adams for T. Higgins and a first, Devontae Adams for T. Higgins and a 2022 first and a 2022 second. That deal, I guarantee you, can get it done. Like if you can't get a 2021 first because T. Higgins hype is at an all-time high, I guarantee you the other deal will get it done. Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, swap them all in, right? Target guys like Laviska Shenault as well was also a really good target in my opinion. Like Jalen Reagor, these are guys you can kind of grab high on, and then also get those second round picks too. They're definitely not worth as much as first round picks, and their value won't increase as much. But if you're a rebuilder, what I've seen is like if you accumulate enough second round picks, once you get into the draft, it becomes pretty easy to flip those second round picks for like future first, especially if you have a really strong class. Like this 2021 class is viewed as pretty damn strong, especially at the wide receiver, quarterback, and a couple running backs and tight ends, right? So when you're sitting there in like the top of the second round and you got someone like Jalen Waddle still staring you in the face, I bet you money that there's a chance there's someone else the bigger Jalen Waddle fan than you are, and they'll be willing to pony up a 2022 first for that pick. And that's why I also value 22 seconds. Right now, they're not worth as much, right? But the trick I've always seen is I take a 2022 21 second when I'm on the clock and someone really wants that player and they're a contending team, you can typically squeeze out a future first out of him, even if you add back like a third round pick or something like that, right? And if you sell them the dream of becoming tender. And again, that's just transferring risk because if you're a rebuilder, the second round picks, the hit rates, depending on where you're drafting from, like aren't that great, right? So again, if you're not close to winning, you're taking that risk of that player, of that rookie busting and transferring it to someone else and locking in a future first round value, which again, never decreases. So this is just it's like a trading principle. It's a trading concept, and like it seems obvious, right? But just like I don't really see too many people like talking about it all the time. But the transfer of risk is absolutely now is the best time to do it because this is when the playoff picture is totally clear and you have guys that are willing to assume that risk because at the end of the tunnel is a potential championship, right? And championships matter the most. So the fact that you're able to find a counterparty that's willing to take on the risk and you have something to offer and you can transfer that risk and store value on your players and on your team, that's the perfect recipe for rebuilding into the next year or two. So that's all I wanted to cover. It's a shorter episode today, but hopefully it was helpful to you. If I'm probably going to start covering some of the metrics and data and calculations and stuff over the next little while. It seems like that's something you guys definitely wanted to see. And then I'll probably do some more rookie deep dives and we'll talk some more Devi as well because I'm already past 2021. I'm on 2022. So if that's your game, make sure you stay tuned. If that's your interest, make sure you drop some comments below. Let me know and just let me know anything else you guys want to see. I'll try my best to kind of tailor to it. I usually have a good sense of the content I want to cover, but I'm always happy to adjust for the viewers, for the Wolves, for the Wolf Pack. I'm willing to do it all. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you found it helpful. If you did, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, follow me on Twitter, and make sure you engage. And hopefully, you guys have a great Thanksgiving holidays with your family. Eat some of that bird, eat some of that ham. You do whatever it is. That's all I got.